weird to have a microphone, but I'm doing it because we're on YouTube, and so people can see us. And so this conversation is being recorded, so you can go back and listen to some of the advice. And there will be advice, so you should have questions. And I hope you'll think about some of the questions that you'll have. My name is Jessica Lowenthal. I'm the director here. I want to welcome you all to Writers House. I want to welcome this panel, the Nora Magid Mentorship Panel, which I think we've been doing now for 800 years. Yes, we've been doing it for 800 years. And along with Writers House, we've partnered with the Nora Magid Mentorship Prize and the Daily Pennsylvanian to host this panel about careers in journalism. And for the full 800-year history of this project, which is probably more, I think, 20 years, Stephen Fried has been the heart and soul of it. So I'm going to introduce Stephen a little bit, and then Stephen will introduce the panel, I think. And there will be time for you to ask questions, as I said, so please do have questions. So Stephen Fried, as I said, is our illustrious moderator and host. He's an award-winning journalist. He teaches here, and he teaches at Columbia. He's written 6 books, I believe, 6. He's not correcting me, so I'm going to say that's right. He writes big books about interesting people. There's one on Benjamin Rush. There's Fred Harvey, the supermodel Gia. But he also writes really compellingly and hopefully, and right now, importantly, about mental health. He's a 2-time winner of the National Magazine Award, and he's been a staff writer at Vanity Fair, GQ, Glamour, and Philadelphia Magazine. But he's also a tireless advocate for mentorship in particular, and one goal of this program is to mentor young journalists, emerging journalists, and allow people to ask questions about how careers can happen, how careers have happened, how careers are happening. And we have people here from the Nora Magid Mentorship Prize community to help talk about that. So please help me welcome this panel and Stephen Fried, and we'll get going.
Thank you. Thanks, Jessica. So this is actually the 20th anniversary of the Nora Prize. So next spring, we will give the 20th Nora Prize. But this is Elliot Kaplan. Elliot and I started the Nora Prize. We were Nora's most annoying students and the ones who missed her the most after she passed away. You wouldn't believe it because you have a journalism major and everything now at Penn. When we were undergrads at Penn, there was one nonfiction writing class for people who were interested in journalism, and that was Nora's class. And that's why after she died, we started this prize to pass on the mentorship that she did. So the prize, as Jessica said, it's we do it this evening together with Kelly Writers House, with the DP, and with a journalism minor. And our panelists are all winners of the Nora Magid Prize. Matt Flegenheimer, who won in 2011, who's working at the New York Times. Isabella Simonetti, who won it 2 years ago. Wow, it's on 2 years.
Call me old?
Who is also working at the New York Times. And Jess Goodman, who won in 2012, who's now a best-selling author of young adult books. She's also a National Magazine Award, a winning award editor from Cosmopolitan, and she worked before that at Entertainment Weekly, at Huffington Post, and is also one of the only winners of the Nora Prize who went to journalism school. So originally when we started the Nora Prize, we thought it would be for people who didn't need to go to journalism school, and Jess sort of schooled us on that. So over the years, mentors need to sometimes learn how to shut up and listen to the people that they are trying to mentor. Nora actually taught us that a lot, and so the Mentorship Prize has grown and changed over the last 20 years. This is Nora. She never wanted to have her picture taken. I snapped this picture of her in class one time. She was so angry. So this prize has been being given since 2004 to one Penn senior who shows exceptional ability and promise in writing, reporting, and editing, and who would benefit from the combined mentorship of the Nora Network and their friends and colleagues. The prize is now up to $4,000, which the older people on the panel will make a sneer at because they didn't get $4,000. But we have continued to raise money for it over the years, and $4,000 is sort of the sweet spot for all Kelly Writers House things now. So we wanted to be hip, and we're actually going to go past them next year so we can be more. It's $4,000 to be used however the student chooses for professional development. And it can be used, and this is something that you may not have thought of, but there is now a thing where you have to have student funding after you graduate to take an internship that has to be tied to a school. So this is something that we never would have predicted in a million years would exist. But now there are internships where you still have to be getting funding from this college. So the Nora Prize can be used for that, for a post-grad internship that requires college link-up. The winner also gets unbelievable access to not only the Nora people who were at Penn, but all their friends. And what I will tell you is these guys will tell you they use the network a lot in all different ways than they would have expected. The members of the network use the network themselves. In our business, you always need some help, and you always need an ear, and you always need somebody who maybe has been through things that you haven't been through before. So this kind of network always existed at Penn for fiction writers, for poets, for all different kinds of people. It didn't exist for nonfiction writers, and it was one of our jobs and one of our goals in setting up the Nora Prize that this would exist. So the other thing is that we pick people who we know will mentor, and these guys already do a lot of mentoring of undergrads, and that's part of what we expect when they get the prize. The prize is open to all seniors at Penn. Preference is given to those who attempt to make a career in some form of media. And this is the website for it. It's up on the CPCW site, not hard to find. If you go up on the CPCW site and just type in Nora, you go up on the Kelly Writers House site, it'll come up. This is the website for it. The deadline for applying this year is January 16th, 2023 at 11:59. And if you have questions about it, we can talk about it later. But that's my pitch for the Nora Prize and for mentorship at Penn. So I want to introduce our panelists. The way we have done this panel traditionally is to let each person sort of tell the arc of their story and then ask questions. So interestingly, when they give you their bios, they never tell you what you were doing at Penn, because that doesn't belong on their bios anymore. So you did, I know. So I'm going to read you the long form versions of these bios that I've added to. So Matt Flegenheimer is a correspondent for the New York Times, focused on long form profiles, political figures, and other subjects for the paper and for the magazine. He began at the Times in 2011, first as an intern and then as a metro and transportation reporter, before starting to cover political campaigns. Is that all right?
That's all right.
Cool. As an undergrad, he wrote for the DP.
I would correct you if it was wrong, though.
Why? He wrote for the DP. Were you mostly sports, or did you do both?
All sports.
All sports. He was an intern at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Philadelphia Inquirer internship used to be a thing. I think it has been less of a thing lately.
Twice.
But they stopped doing it. Part of what we'll talk about tonight. There are many internship programs that existed for many, many years, and Penn students just sort of always went to them, and COVID kind of ate them. And we're kind of waiting to see if COVID will spit them out and let them start again. So this is going to be the first year that people are going to reasonably go back and ask, are you going to start doing an internship program the way you always did? So when Matt was here, I mean, 4 or 5 Penn students a year worked at the Philadelphia Inquirer as juniors or seniors. That was just a very common thing. He also freelanced a major feature as an undergrad to Sports Illustrated about the possible mental health issues surrounding the death of a suicide of a Penn quarterback, which was an amazing story. I
feel like I should jump in. It was a lineman, not a quarterback.
A lineman. I'm sorry. He wasn't a quarter. My bad. Jess Goodman is New York Times best-selling author. I love saying that, of the young adult thrillers They Wish They Were Us, They'll Never Catch Us, and The Counselors, which was the talk at all summer camps this summer. She's a former op-ed editor at Cosmopolitan magazine. She was part of the 2017 team that won a National Magazine Award in personal service. She's also held editorial positions at Entertainment Weekly at HuffPost. Her work has been published at Glamour, Condé Nast Traveler, The Cut, Elle, Bustle, and Marie Claire. Is Bustle gone?
No.
I thought I read that Bustle was going.
Bustle lives, right?
They closed one of their sites.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
There you go.
It's not your fault or anything.
Certainly not.
As an undergrad, she was co-editor of 34th Street. Or you were editor of 34th Street?
I was the editor.
Okay.
Yeah.
And after graduating in 2012, she got a master's degree in journalism at Columbia. Isabella Simonetti graduated in 2021. She is the David Carr Fellow in Business Reporting at the New York Times. And by the way, Isabella and Matt will tell you the difference between what internships were when Matt went there and what fellowships are at the Times now. It's another thing that has changed quite a bit just in the time that we've been doing this event. Previously, she was a media reporter at the Observer, where she covered technology and social media, launched her own newsletter on the business of the creator economy. She has interned at Bloomberg News, Vox, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and the New York Post. She graduated from Penn in 2021 and served as president of the Daily Pennsylvanian. So please applaud for our panel. And so, again, what we're going to do is let each person talk for about 10 minutes. And what I'd like you to do is give us an idea of sort of the arc of what of your career, but also give us a little bit of an idea of what existed for you when you were coming out that's different now, that people need to sort of maybe recalibrate when they think about, even if they want to be one of you right now, how it might be different to make that happen. And so Matt nodded the most, so he can go first.
First mistake. It's working? Okay. So Steve went through a lot of this. I graduated in 2011, wrote sports for the DP. I was kind of a delinquent DP reporter as a junior and a senior, and did more freelance work for the Inquirer. Interned there for 2 summers. Did some freelance work, as Stephen mentioned, for other sites, including SI. And was an intern at the Times out of school in 2011 on the Metro desk. Had a 10-week, I guess they still called it a fellowship then, but it's different in ways that we'll get into than what Isabella's doing now. 10-week program for the summer.
How many of them were there then?
How many fellows?
Yeah.
I think there were a couple on Metro, probably 10 or 12, including some editor fellowships and photography. And so at the end of the summer, essentially went into this sort of nebulous professional purgatory space at the Times, where my ID kept working and I kept showing up in the building, but I wasn't a staff writer and I wasn't an intern. And that lasted for a while until I sort of weaseled into a full-time job there at the end of the year. Had a few beats in the sort of ignominious early beat kind of track of night rewrite, and then back to Metro for Transit, City Hall, and covered the last 2 presidential campaigns. Was in DC for a while in the middle of all that, which I blocked out for a second. And am now basically toggling between the magazine and the paper, mostly doing kind of long-form profiles, often about politics, not always. And now I only have 9.5 minutes to fill. I think, as Stephen said, that the Inquirer was really an important place for me, and getting to work there for 2 summers, first on Metro, first on features desks, on some of the weekly features desks after my sophomore year, and after my junior year went back for Metro. And it was a really dark time there after a lot of layoffs and ownership turnover, which meant there was a lot for interns to do. So I got to do a lot more writing than I might have expected, and I do think that's been sort of a piece of the Penn journalism infrastructure for a long time. I guess now it's less so, but had another, couple of colleagues here from Penn who were at the Inquirer around then, and professors who taught here who worked at the Inquirer as editors and reporters, some of whom still teach here. And that was kind of huge. In terms of other changes here, there wasn't a journalism minor even when I was an undergrad. I think maybe my senior year they sort of backfilled a minor, so I could claim all of these electives I had taken just as nonfiction courses as sort of a retroactive minor. But there really was not nearly the kind of infrastructure that there is now. Didn't mean that there weren't great courses, and I took 3 Dick Pullman classes, and Paul Hendrickson, and Avery Rome, Dan Rubin, and Stephen was not teaching here at that point. I think, were you?
No.
Yeah. So I'm innocent on that one. And, that was obviously a huge sort of preparation for kind of a long-form life thereafter, although for most of my Times life until the last few years, I've been on these sort of high-intensity kind of daily beats for a lot of it, with a lot of room for enterprise too, but, definitely responsible for news of the day on the campaigns and otherwise. I think I'm rambling at this point. What do you think?
Tell us about covering the campaign.
2016 was a very different experience than 2020 for the obvious pandemic reasons, and because in 16 I was one of the sort of campaign trail candidate reporters, so essentially spent the entirety of the primary season chasing around initially Jeb Bush and then Ted Cruz through various early voting states in these United States.
But Jeb Bush was considered a plum assignment, right? Jeb
It was. Oh, I remember.
win.
I sat down with my editor. That it was sort of late summer 2015 when we were gearing up, and she's like, "This is it. You're covering the guy, the Republican nominee for president, Jeb Bush!" Exclamation point.
How many of you know who Jeb Bush is? Okay, well, just because his last name is Bush.
That's much better than he did in Iowa or New Hampshire. So by like November, they kind of elbowed me over to Ted Cruz because he seemed like more of a viable candidate, which he was for a while. And then I was on the Hillary beat for the end in the general. So that's a whole other.
Did you have Hillary by yourself, or who else?
No, there were a few of us, and the general's never as much fun. I mean, if there are people who are interested in political journalism, we can talk about this at some point. But the primary season is this sort of free for all, and particularly in an open campaign like that one was with no incumbent. The general, there's two candidates. Every reporter in the country is covering them. It feels like, and you just sort of lose the running room, and the sort of protective bubble around them increases, and there's just a lot less kind of bandwidth for the sort of enterprise stories that are the most fun part of that sort of thing. 2015 and 2019 were kind of the more journalistically fruitful years of those cycles, I think, for me anyway, just because there was room to kind of pick your targets and not be as reactive to news cycles, which happens as the campaign rolls on. And 2020 with COVID was just sort of, I did a little bit of travel towards the end, a couple of pieces from the road, and I was also in sort of a more senior kind of roving enterprise beat on that campaign, so I was not assigned to a particular candidate. But still, ran around Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and was in the office for a big primary night on a Tuesday, and the next day the world shut down, and we didn't get back to the newsroom until election night. So I digress.
There's two other things I'd like you to talk about if you could. One is, one of the reasons that we gave you the prize, and one of the reasons you were such a prized journalism student here, and I think in your first couple of years, was I think you did something that a lot of people don't do with stories, which is you always wrote leads that people would read whether they gave a shit about the subject or not.
That's very nice of you.
And so I think that's what you were known for when you were an undergrad. I think that was probably what propelled you at the Times. I think it's still an unusual strategy for people. I think it's still the right strategy for most young writers. But so I'd love for you to talk about that, because I think it's something that you've always been really good at.
That's very nice of you. I think it was endlessly frustrating to various DP editors when I would file 900-word stories with 600-word leads. But other than that, no, there is definitely, and we have access to the sort of often depressing story statistics now about how long people stay on a story and reader engagement and all of that. And I don't know the science on this, but it feels like intuitively the more sort of narrative a lead can be on certain kinds of stories, the longer people will stick with it, and ideally you sort of hook them for the whole thing. And now doing more sort of especially long form stories and magazine stories that are 8,000-9,000 words, it's a whole other kind of reader recruitment strategy to kind of sink your teeth into something early. But even as an intern on Metro in 2011, I just had a lot of kind of slice of life New York City type stories, and would try to do whatever I could to, not in a sort of needlessly ostentatious way that would draw attention to itself for no good reason, but like engage a reader in a way that would make a story stand out from the typical sort of inverted pyramid like AP newspaper fare that can often populate the section. Now it's a whole other era where those kinds of 700-word Metro stories don't really get written anymore. But at the time, it was
They're
a really
long-form stories now.
right. Their lists are long-form stories, nothing in between. Or live. Live is our big push now, which Isabella knows well. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a balance between being self-indulgent on that and engaging a reader. And I've run afoul of that standard before, I'm sure, and been self-indulgent. But on balance, taking those kinds of chances felt like the way to go.
Yeah, I don't think it's indulgent, and they're not all long. I mean, to start a story with a character, to start a story with an actual scene that can be drawn out even a sentence or two, maybe not what you see in every story, but it makes stories about nothing stand out. Yeah. The other thing that I would just point out, Matt sort of jumped over this like it was not any big deal, but just do the math. So Matt's fellowship ended in August, and Matt got hired at the Times in January, if I remember correctly, or it might have even been February.
No, late December, early January.
Okay,
Yeah.
So you can imagine as mentors, and this was pretty early in the prize, we were trying to say to Matt, like, you could get it.
Get out.
You have all these clips from the Times. Maybe you should try to get another job. And Matt was like, no, these people tell me there's a reason to keep doing this, and they're giving me work. So he made a place for himself. And interestingly, we've seen this happen a couple of times since for people that as mentors, we were trying to say to them, look, maybe you should have a plan B, and maybe your clips would look good to the opposing paper. And the person said, no, I want to be here, and I think that this will work out for me, and it's my risk to take. And as long as it's an informed risk, that's cool. But I remember that being a long 5 months. And,
Totally. I
and
can
it
think
totally
now,
paid off.
Yeah, and it was definitely December because I remember now when they told me they were hiring me and offered a job, they said, can you work Christmas? So that was 2 yeses. Those were wildly stressful months, and it was still sort of journalistically rewarding and doing the kinds of stories that were a lot of fun to do on Metro. But yeah, there was no guarantee, obviously, at the end of the program, and I'd hoped that, as Stephen said, at minimum, having clips from there that I was proud of would serve me well one way or the other. But it's often just a fluke of timing and head count and the winds of the newsroom. And I don't know that that's really changed.
No, I mean, somebody still has to believe in themselves more, take an additional risk, and also be lucky. So anyway, thanks. We will take questions from everybody at the end. So Jess, why don't you go next?
Yeah. Hi.
Get closer to the microphone or take it to you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jessica Goodman. You heard my bio from Stephen, but I graduated from Penn in 2012, and while I was at Penn, I was like all about 34th Street, so I was, an editor for most of the semesters that I was here at Penn, and I was the editor-in-chief my senior year, and that was really like the cornerstone of my Penn experience, especially when it came to writing. I was a creative writing major as well, and like Matt said, like we didn't have the journalism minor when we were here, and at the time, I think maybe I didn't really realize or know that I wanted to go into writing nonfiction or fiction until probably like my junior year. So I just knew I wanted to be a creative writing major. I took as many writing classes as I could. And when I was a junior, I applied for the Real Arts Fellowship, which I know is still around.
Do you guys all know what the Real Arts Fellowship? Raise your hand if you don't know what the Real Arts Fellowship is.
So it's
more than you think. Go
ahead.
It's
this great program that the Writers House offers, where they kind of set you up with internships that are paid through a stipend through Penn at various magazines, media organizations, newspapers. I'm sure Jessica has lots of other places where they're museums, screenwriting. There's so many more of them now than there were when I was here. But it was
also created for a very weird reason. One, it was good for Penn students. Two, there was a lawsuit at Condé Nast that forced all the companies to stop having unpaid interns because the belief was that too many people had been taken advantage of and sent out to get people's dry cleaning and stuff like that. So basically, if you wanted a summer
not a Condé Nast.
No, not a Condé Nast.
Never.
But so if you wanted a summer internship, this is now the world, but it was not the world that long ago. You have to come with your own money.
Yeah.
So you have to come with your own money from something like Real Arts or something like, some people use Kerf for things like that. But you basically, if you want to get paid at a publication nowadays, you have to show up with your own money from your school in order to do that. That's a big change. But the good thing is that Penn is really set up for it.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of, and the DP has it too. So the DP has some summer fellowships as well. So, but Jess was sort of one of the earliest ones. Probably Real Arts wasn't around for that long before you got yours.
No, maybe a decade or so, I think. But yeah, so I had the Real Arts internship at Rolling Stone, which was such an amazing experience. I spent the whole summer interning there, doing all the random intern stuff. I guess I did get coffee, dry cleaning. I even helped one editor divide up pot brownies to distribute to the other editors in the office for a U2 concert they were going to. And we can keep that in. I think that's fine. So it was just this great experience, and it was my first time being in like a professional newsroom, and I loved it so much. It made me really decide like I want to go into magazines when I get out of school. And so my senior year, I also took a YA, or I guess it was my junior year, I took a YA writing class through my creative writing major, which with Melissa Jeltsin. I'm not sure if she's still teaching, but I think she might be. And I loved it so much. And so that kind of comes in later in my career. But so my senior year, I applied for the Nora Magid Fellowship Prize, which why we're all here today, which is amazing. And that kind of like helped me feel the confidence, gain the confidence to know that I could go into this world, having the Rolling Stone internship and the Nora Prize. But I really felt like I didn't have the reporting skills that I thought that I needed in order to go into journalism. I didn't work at like a newspaper like Matt did, and I didn't, I didn't really have like hard news experience, I thought. So I decided that I wanted to go to journalism school. So I applied to just a couple, but when I got into Columbia, I decided to go. And it was a really awesome, interesting, strange experience, I think. It's only like a 10-month program. And when I got there in 2013, it was kind of this like, they were just starting to like understand that social media was like a thing that was going to like influence the way we did journalism. So it was an interesting time to be there, but I definitely learned a lot. And in between my senior year of Penn and going to journalism school, I actually did another internship at New York Magazine that I got through a friend that I had made at my internship at Rolling Stone. So that's like a big piece of advice I always give is like be friends with everybody, especially your co-interns, because like you never know when someone will pop up to be a friend or a colleague. And so when I got to Columbia, it was great, and they had this like amazing huge career fair where they like brought all of these recruiters in, and that helped me get an internship at Huffington Post. And so I started there as like a 6-month fellow on their entertainment team, which was really exciting, and that's kind of like the world I wanted to live in, pop culture entertainment. And I ended up staying there. I got hired, and I got hired full time, and I was there for almost 2 years. And this was the era of like, I was writing 10 stories a day, like aggregating like crazy, like very rarely doing my own, reporting. And it was
Explain what aggregating is. Some people may have never had that job or know what that is.
Yeah, totally. Sorry. Aggregating is basically like, so, for example, Matt just wrote this amazing profile of Ron DeSantis, and someone at HuffPost Politics at the time might aggregate, like take a couple bullet points from Matt's story, write it as their own story, and then like link back to the Times and be like, go check out more there.
And get twice the traffic that the Times story got.
And we would get like 4 times the traffic. Yeah. So it was kind of this like weird, wild, wild west days of the internet and aggregation journalism. But it was really fun, and I learned a lot. And from there, my boss at the time got hired to run Entertainment Weekly's website, and he brought me with him, which was really exciting. It was my first time being an editor and kind of overseeing other people, and I managed the books and music verticals of their website. And that's where I really started to learn more about the publishing industry and getting interested in writing my own books. So while I was at EW, it was another kind of like really intense writing and editing, 10 stories a day, like just crazy times trying to chase traffic. And I decided I just wanted to like slow down a little bit. Like I didn't want to be in that really fast-paced, intense, traffic-driven environment anymore. And I really wanted to get back to the original reason why I wanted to go into journalism, which was magazines. And so I talked to Elliot a lot, who worked at Hearst at the time. And I was really always focused on Cosmopolitan. I loved the brand. I wanted to work at a women's magazine. And they had a bunch of openings. And thankfully, I was hired as a senior editor to do something I had never done before, which was edit like a real magazine, which was crazy. So I ended up editing the lifestyle section, which again was not something I had done previously. I was doing like home decor, travel, personal finance, career advice, like all this kind of fun service journalism. And it was amazing. For about a year, I worked only on the print magazine and had this very like luxurious schedule of working like 10 to 6, which was like kind of unheard of. But I was also able to, finish my first book and sell it in that time, which was really exciting. And from there, my job there kind of evolved. We merged with the digital, so Cosmo.com and Cosmopolitan became one brand, and I started working more on the website as well. And in my final act there, I was the op-ed editor. So I was editing a lot of like personal essays and celebrity and guest essays, and kind of finding ways to like drive the conversation, which was really exciting, and break news in that way. But last year in June, I decided to quit my job full time to focus more on my novels, but also because I wanted to try freelance journalism as, this kind of like side project. And it's been great. It's been really fun. And I do a lot of like celebrity interviews and celebrity profiles, as well as lifestyle content. So I'm kind of marrying like both of my past topic areas, I guess. And I do a lot of like, fill-ins for people who are going on like, parental leave at magazines. I edit a bunch for various blogs and websites. But it's a totally different kind of lifestyle, totally different kind of career. And I remember always talking to other editors who were leaving magazines that I was at, and they were going to kind of embark on this journey. And I would always say like, like, what's the biggest piece of advice you would give? Like, why? Like, what do you need to know before becoming freelance? Because I feel like, the idea of being a freelance writer sounds very like romantic to some, but you can very easily become just like broke and like have no assignments. And they always said like, unfortunately, or fortunately, you really need to put in the work at some of these places full time in order to gain the network of people that you can call on and say, hey, do you have any assignments? Hey, I'd love to pitch you something. Because right now, having worked at so many places with so many people, I feel like my network is quite vast, and I'm able to send out an email to, 40 people and say like, hey, I just finished a big project. Like, do you guys have any assignments? Like, or, what are you looking for right now? Can I pitch you something? And it's been fruitful in that way. So I'm at an interesting point in my career where I'm not really tied to any one brand, but I'm still doing a lot of journalism, but also fiction. And that's
Who were you
my story.
freelancing for?
I still do a lot of work for Cosmo, which is really fun. I'm on assignment right now for Vanity Fair, which is also cool. And I do a lot for Bustle and kind of pinch hit at like Glamour sometimes. So it's a lot of like women's magazines. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
And are you earning your living doing the freelancing, or are you earning a living writing books?
I'm earning my living writing books. I will say that, I look at my books, like my QuickBooks or whatever, like where I keep all my money. And I'm always trying to figure, I'm like, if I just did journalism, like what would this look like? And it would look pretty bleak. But so I'll say that like most of my income does come from publishing books, which is like amazing and so exciting. And a lot of it comes from journalism, but there's like this third area, like this third wedge of the pie that no one really talks about, which is like brand work and like kind of this strange like consulting gig stuff that like we don't really talk about in journalism because it feels kind of dirty. But like if
Talk about it.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I mean, I wrote an essay for Catapult, which is this really cool writing website, magazine, publishing house that paid me $200 for the essay, which is like $0 really. But I wrote an essay that was like, nobody talks about like what like the dirty things that they do to make money, which is like, for me, it's like I did a whole stint at J. Crew writing Instagram captions, which is like, I don't know, I found really fun. And like, I'm not really going to write about J. Crew in a lot of my work, but if I did, I would totally disclose it. But like, that was great. And that was like a weekly, or yeah, I think I got paid weekly for that. So like, that's awesome. And like, I do a lot of that kind of stuff too on the side. So, it's fun, but that's like the kind of stuff that I also would never have gotten if I didn't know people from journalism who then moved into this like marketing brand, or like, you know, this marketing brand world as well. So it's interesting, I think. Yeah.
That's great.
Get me that job at J. Crew.
I know, it was fun. I
Now,
did marketing copy.
If you get that job and you don't mostly have journalism or other writing things, then you just go there. That's the challenge.
I was just teasing.
No, but yeah, it's
comic relief.
there's no comic no comic relief in
Very
brand.
serious.
I am sorry. So a couple things that I would point out for Jess. So you know, Jess came to us. Jess was editor of 34th Street. She had like a very active time at Penn writing, but she was also very clear that there were certain things that she didn't think she could do at a professional level. That's why she went to J School. And even though she had questions after about whether she should have gone to J School, we've had that conversation too. But I think there's two things to take away from that's important. One is that, you know, I remember meeting you in your senior year, and you were still trying to figure out what you needed to do and what you didn't, what you had already done. A lot of people in their senior years don't step back and make that, have that thought, or use their senior years to make sure they add to whatever they're going to do. So most people who were editor of 34th Street only would have applied for jobs, would not have applied to J School, would have assumed they would take whatever job they took because they were editor of 34th Street, ran their own magazine, had done a lot of writing. So the two takeaways from that are, especially, you know, in your junior and senior year, you still have a great deal of time to, one, if you never did this before but you decided you wanted to do it, you can start it. We have had many people, we had people who won the Nora Prize who didn't start doing nonfiction writing at Penn until they were juniors. And we've had people who have competed for good jobs in journalism who really started taking it seriously as seniors, because the question is, do you have the talent? Do you really want to do it? And do you want to buckle down and figure out what kind of contacts you need to make and what kinds of things you want to write? Because the other part of it is that sometimes people who've worked at the DP and Street, they've been editing for a long time and they haven't written in a really long time. But all the jobs that they are vying for are writing jobs. So the fact that they've edited a million things or been president of the paper, those are all cool things, but that skill set, no one comes in. No one said to Isabella when she was applying for the fellowship of the Times, would you like to be the president of the New York Times?
They actually did.
They did? Okay, well then maybe I'm wrong. So it's important to be able to say, look, it's okay to ask those questions about what you've done, and it's also okay to ask about what you could add to your portfolio, even starting today, starting in September of your senior year, what you could add to your portfolio before, say, you were going to be interviewing for jobs in the late winter and early spring. It only takes one story or two stories that don't look like anything you ever did before to change the way people think of you. I mean, I don't think that Matt did that football story for that reason, but at the same time, it did put a different spin on just the level of ambition of what you could do as an undergrad, and that I think was published while you were still an undergrad.
It was. I got the internship, but it was published when I was an undergrad.
So one of the takeaways that we always want to do in terms of, we meet too many people when we do the Nora Prize interviews in February, when we say to them, did you think about this? And they're like, no, I didn't think I could still try that late. And so what we really want to try, part of the reason we started doing this event was to get people to think early in the year, if I really am interested in any aspect of nonfiction writing, any aspect of the media, what have I already done? What have I not done? And what can I add to what I do? Keeping in mind that all the organizations, and I don't want to say anything negative about the DP because I love the DP, but the DP never asks you to ask this question because they want your senior year for them. You are a quality person who can churn out a lot of work. They want that for you. They want that for them. Why wouldn't they? So, and I'm not saying you shouldn't work for the DP in your senior year. What I'm saying is that you should keep in mind what you've done, what you want to get done, what you want to look like to people if you want to go out there and apply for internships and apply for entry-level jobs. Starting right now, adding to what you're doing is a positive thing. And for Jess, that meant I'm going to go to journalism school. Yeah. And we were stunned by this.
I interned with you too my senior year.
That's right.
Which was really fun, and I helped Stephen research a book, which was amazing. So.
Thank you.
Yes, there was time for me.
But by the way, before I introduce you, I want to say that the winners of this year's Nora Prize, now I see, are both here. So B and Alan, why don't you stand up? These are the two guys who just won the Nora Prize that we gave in April. B is at Billy Penn. B is at Billy Penn at WHYY. Alan is somehow still an undergraduate at Penn. But is working on his project. If you haven't ever seen it, it's a fantastic project where he and his partner went all over the country asking young people just about the future. And it's a wonderful project. It's been a lot of places have covered it, and I haven't seen the stuff you guys did this summer, so I'm curious to see what they added to it. But anyway, congratulations to you guys, and it's great to have you here.
And not to hijack the panel, but if you have immediate questions about applying for the prize or anything, ask me. That's why I'm here, in case you have questions about things that these people somehow haven't answered in such a comprehensive discussion.
Okay. Isabel, it's your turn. Grab the mic.
How can I be helpful?
Just
I'll talk. You
tell
talk,
your
tell me to shut
story.
up. Okay. Yeah. So I graduated from Penn in 2021, and I think I joined the DP sort of before I even got to Penn because I just was annoying and emailed someone who was an editor, and I feel like that's kind of my advice, is just to be annoying and force yourself into places that you're not qualified to be, and then just try your best. And so I started on opinion at the DP, and I also wrote for 34th Street. And I took a bunch of journalism classes at Penn. I was an English major, and I minored in journalism because that existed. And I was always interested in like creative writing and nonfiction. And I just tried to write as much as possible. And I also like tried to get as many internships as I could out of school. My first internship in journalism was at the New York Post, which was like very wacky. And like I spent a day chasing around some ice cream truck owner who like owed the city millions of dollars in parking tickets or something like that. And wrote about that and ridiculous other things, but I was writing for a publication, so I think that's pretty much what matters, like just writing as much as you can. I ended up editing the opinion section at the DP, and then I became president of the DP. And while I was doing that, I tried to keep writing and like interning at places, talking to people. I think networking is really a big thing, like, you know, just asking people for advice about how to go into journalism, applying for jobs, and yeah, just talking to as many people as possible. And like I said, honestly, like not thinking that you're not qualified to be somewhere, because even if you are, like maybe there's space for you to try. And I have gotten rejected from a ton of things too, but just keeping on trying and writing. I'm now I
Talk
I
about
should
some
say
of the
what I
places
do
you
now.
wrote as
Yeah.
undergrad and what you did after you got out of school.
Yeah. So I interned at the New York Post, like I said. The summer after that, I worked at Vox writing for their consumerism desk, The Goods. So I got some experience doing like business adjacent reporting there.
Did Penn people help you get either of those jobs?
Sort of. I just emailed a lot of people. And I was editor, or I was president of the DP when the Vox thing came to be, and like someone at Vox emailed me and said, "Oh, we need an intern," and I needed a job, so I helped myself. Was that funny? Sorry. And then in the fall of my senior year, I interned at the Inquirer doing like breaking news stuff, and I wrote some features, and then I was applying to jobs, and right after college I interned on the tech team at Bloomberg, just wrote as much as possible, and I learned about business journalism and how to use a Bloomberg terminal. For those of you who like don't know what that is, it's just a machine. But what I have found that I will say is like there is a lot of room in journalism for people who aren't afraid of numbers. I am afraid of numbers, but now I know something about them, even though I'm still horrible at math. And then after Bloomberg, I worked at the New York Observer as like a media reporter, and I wrote about social media and tech, which is still an area that I love and I'm really interested in. And then I got the David Carr Fellowship at the New York Times, which is just sort of like all business reporting, and I write about anything that could fall under the realm of business, which can be anything. Like anything that involves money can be a business story, which is what I like about it. And also coming out of college, I didn't have a strong idea of, oh, I really want to work for a magazine or I want to be a political journalist. So I sort of fell into this, and I like it a lot because it allows me to write about a lot of different things. What else?
I'd be curious, you're the first person who won the prize who sort of grew up at the DP under COVID, right? And you had to, running the DP, you had to sort of steer it through COVID. So I'm curious whether it seems like we're post-COVID or not yet. And, what it feels like, to be in that kind of situation.
Yeah, it was really hard, and I don't think I did the best job, honestly, probably. I probably did a really bad job, but I tried. I think it was really sad on one hand because I was so excited to have this job and like be president of the DP, and then most of it ended up being like from my childhood bedroom, which was like, the whole point of being at the DP is like you get to be in the office and interact with people, and I loved that, and I tried my best to like keep it together, and like we did a lot of work that everyone else, like the reporters and editors, deserve so much credit for. And on top of that, we like introduced an internship program in the summer for people to work at the DP and get paid, for people who had like lost their summer internships because of COVID, which was great. And we introduced these like diversity fellowships in order to like help improve our diversity and inclusion efforts, which be basically spearheaded. And yeah, it was a very difficult time, but at the same time I think a lot of like good work came out of it, and the DP needed to make a lot of changes that it was forced to make because of the circumstances.
Do you miss the executive part of it, or were you happy to not do it anymore and go back to writing?
I don't miss that at all. I think it taught me a lot about like how to communicate with people and how to be a leader and how to talk to people and deal with conflict that wasn't my own. But I am a hermit and I want to just write by myself.
One thing I remember from your Nora Prize process, and I think Elliot did this, not me, but if I remember correctly, one of the pieces that we loved the most that you gave us, you didn't originally submit. It was a piece you did for Buzz's class. Yes. And it only came after we asked you for other pieces. I bring it up only because I think it's interesting sometimes when people get into editing positions and they come to us at the DP, they forget they were writers, and they forget what they wrote for classes when they were really free. When we were really lucky in a way, because Nora was like the only class we could take, and most of us took her twice, and a lot of us had bared our souls before we knew what the hell we were doing, and then later maybe became a little bit more professional as we went along. Yeah. But I just remember that because there's been other people who've had that experience, but I think your piece was the most that way, that it was something that you didn't even talk about what it was about, but also the writing in it was a big surprise.
What was it about? I don't remember.
It was about your mom.
Oh, okay. I don't remember. What was the question?
I bring it up only because I wonder whether there's some advice about making sure that people sort of bring together all the things they learn that are very professional, but that also all the things you do in creative writing that are just about writing and being free and finding your voice.
Yeah, I mean, I think for some people, they find themselves in journalism because they love reporting and talking to people. And I think that's great, but I also, I think the thing that makes me excited is, writing stories. And I wanted to go into journalism because I wanted to get paid to write. And so I honestly think of myself more as a writer than a reporter a lot of the time. And I probably lost some of that at the DP because I was so obsessed with like the journalism that we were doing and like learning how to be a better reporter. But in my classes, I did a ton of valuable writing that apparently Stephen liked, which I appreciate. And so, yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, just writing as much as possible and like taking advantage of every opportunity that you can while you're a student at Penn, because there are so many people who are willing to let you try something if you ask.
Cool. I'm not going to belabor my story because, first of all, it happened in the Pleistocene age. But all I will say is when I was coming out of Penn, it was one of the many times when journalism was over. So 1979 was one of the cyclical years when journalism was over, and now was considered the golden era. So keep in mind people telling you that anything is over and that the worst is all here, because that's just sort of the nature of journalism. My path was straight magazines. I was a co-editor of 34th Street. I told my parents after they had spent all this money for me to go to Penn and be a lawyer that if someone would pay me to do what I did at 34th Street, I was really sorry, but that's what I was going to do. They were really sure that wouldn't happen. And then they were sort of very stunned when it turned out that it did happen. And it happened for a handful of us. A lot of people from the board of 79 stayed in journalism. And their parents are really unhappy. Perhaps we were all inspired by the fact that Penn went to the Final Four that year, so that almost anything could happen if Penn could be in the Final Four. And so, but there is a newspaper path. There is an alt media, new media path. I remember when we added new media to this thing, we all thought they were so cool. Now I think having it on there makes us look kind of silly, but it's okay. But that old-fashioned, I'm going to do long magazine stories path is still a path that exists. There are still publications that do it. There are still people who get paid for it. And oddly, it's a different kind of business because people write books earlier than they used to. Mm-hmm. So a lot of books that you read by people in their 20s would have originally, in the olden days when there were more magazines, have been 10,000-word magazine stories at alt weeklies, at different monthlies that had more space. So I don't necessarily look at this and just go, oh, where are all the magazines that I wrote for when I was a kid? Because what I also see is that a lot of the J School students, when I was teaching at the J School of Columbia, they are getting an opportunity to write nonfiction books at an age when they would have been writing those as magazine stories.
And documentaries.
And do documentaries and stuff too. So there are different kinds of opportunities. And what I would say is anybody who tells you it's all over, it's all dead, there's always a certain percentage of people who tell you that it's always people in their 50s and older who hate what's happened in their own careers. So just be careful of that, because don't rob yourself of the experience of seeing what it was like going to be for you. This is not for everybody. I think almost every one of these panels, we want to make sure that somebody comes away saying, if you have anything that you'd rather do than this, do it. But if there's nothing you would rather do than this, don't let anybody tell you that it can't be done. Because generations of people from Penn have found different kinds of positions in writing, in editing, in packaging, in all different kinds of areas of nonfiction. And they've done it, part because they believed in their own talent, and two, because they've done what all Penn students learn how to do, which is network. If you're going to be intensely competitive, like all Penn students are, remember that it's not a zero-sum game. One of the things that Nora had to tell us was to stop, thinking that every job was only for one person. She basically forced us to give each other jobs, and to make sure that everybody would float together, and we did. And so every generation of people at Penn who come out who are interested in nonfiction, anything, are capable of doing that for each other, and you'd be amazed. Sometimes somebody who's 40 or 50 does it for you, and sometimes somebody who's 24 does it for you, because you can never know. So all I would say is we do this event and we do the Nora Prize because we believe strongly in each generation of people coming out, whether they want to be magazine writers, whether they want to do broadcasters, whether they want to do news. It is available to you, and Penn is now a good breeding ground for that, and a school that honestly people look at. When we came out of school, people only looked to Harvard and Princeton for people who did this work. Penn was, but now they look at Penn. Penn has a great track record. So anyway, I'm going to stop. I hope you guys have some questions, and then we'll have some food. Who has questions? Wow. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I have two questions for the panelists. The first one was why journalism? And then my second question is, what does new media look like? how do you see the future of journalism changing?
Jeez. Who wants that one?
I feel like you were looking at me. I'm 0 for 2. I don't know what new media is. Why journalism? I mean, Stephen sort of said this, that I had a conversation with somebody when I was an intern at the Inquirer that was essentially like, yeah, if you can imagine doing anything else in your life, definitely do that. Not because the person was trying to criticize my work, though maybe that was part of it, but just like, it's a tough road. If anything else feels like it makes sense to you and you could see yourself being happy doing, maybe think about that. And nothing else really computed. And there is a certain amount of obsessiveness with wanting to pursue this sort of existence that just always seemed to make sense to me. I was an econ major, but I don't think I have any other skills particularly, including understanding economics. But new media, I'm stumped. I have no idea.
I feel like I have an idea.
You're very entrepreneurial, though.
Yeah, I am.
Go for it.
I feel like when people talk, well, I will say that like new media in this context, I feel like was added to the panel to talk about like digital media and like social media. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, I feel like in terms of like the future of new media or like the future of journalism, I think that like, you know, I've only been doing this for like, I don't know, maybe 10, 11 years. And I feel like every couple of years there's like this new trend, you know, for a while it's like Twitter, like everything is on Twitter. We used to say at HuffPost, Twitter is the new front page, which means like the front page used to be like people would go to HuffPost.com and then they would go to Twitter and now they go to TikTok or like Instagram or whatever. And it's like for a while it was like Facebook Live was like the thing that was going to save us. And we all had to do like 45 Facebook Lives a week, which like you guys probably don't even know what it is because it was like so bad. But it's just like there's always this new thing. And it always fails after like a couple months. And so the thing that always prevails is good work. It's like if you just like do really, really, really good work, you're going to get noticed. Like you're going to succeed because that's what really matters. And all of this like flashy BS tech stuff is just like it's filler almost, or it's like window dressing. And like sometimes it really is important to make sure that your work is seen by people who are only on TikTok or is seen by people who are only on Twitter. But it's not going to get seen by anybody if it's not good. So like really what you should be focusing on is just making sure that you're like excelling at your craft. That's what I think.
And there's two aspects of that. One is reporting, one is writing.
Yeah.
And I think that you can be pretty advanced as a reporter and nowhere as a writer. You can be pretty advanced as a writer and nowhere as a reporter. Being in college, especially towards the end of college, is a good time to really assess that and to ask yourself what you need to do to get better at the thing that you're less good at, which is counterintuitive to seniors. Seniors tend to want to do what they've gotten a lot of attention for and do as much of it as possible because it's fun. I remember having a column. Elliot had a column. Our goals were to make our friends laugh. That was like about it. If we could write. And the other thing is we wrote many things that only Penn students would understand, which the minute you get out of Penn is useless. Because there's no world that's as insular as a college campus where you can assume that everybody knows everything and you can make inside jokes. So your ability to be a nonfiction writer immediately becomes shown as whether you can explain something to people that don't know it and make them laugh at the joke rather than making the joke that everybody in your dorm knows or everybody on your team knows. So it is a challenge, but I think that what is true at each juncture is you have to make sure that you separate delivery systems from the work. The delivery systems are always changing because of print costs and distribution and new electronic medium and all different kinds of things. But what they get you to is different, and there's always going to be a sea of people who write the captions. That's a perfectly good job, but that doesn't have to be the job you take because that's one of the jobs. I mean, if you like that job, it allows you to not think very much. You can get paid. You can do that too. But the idea that good quality, in-depth nonfiction work is out of style, that people don't read it, that people don't care about it, that it doesn't change the world, or it doesn't have the ability to change the world, anybody who tells you that that part of it's gone is just jaundiced and bitter. Because the next day I can show you a piece that still rocks the world. So all I would say is, one of the things that Nora always tried to teach us, because she was pretty jaundiced. She had been through the magazine world. She had been a job that she loved more than anything. The magazine went out of business. She kind of never got over that. She came to Penn after that. She was really pissed off about that. And she really kind of warned us that people who are young media people become obsessed with the media. They love to read about the media. They love to know everything about the media. You can become pre-jaundiced to the media before you've ever had these problems. So you feel like you already had them. You're already mad at these things that you haven't even experienced yet. Wait to have your own work killed. Wait to have your own career thwarted. And then work through it, because the other part of it is that, one of the good things about mentorship is people who've been fired from jobs and lived, who've lost book contracts and lived. The difference isn't whether you can do the work. The difference is whether you can do the work when you hit an unbelievable roadblock. And so those things are the things that are the same. Distribution changes, funding changes. You have newspapers that are nonprofit now. You have things that are online only. That's fine. Don't get obsessed with that, because the people doing the writing of the words and the taking of the pictures and the doing all that, those skill sets are still pretty much the same, and your ability to have careers in them are pretty much the same. That's a really long answer to one question. The next question won't get as long an answer. Who else has questions? Go ahead. And you guess a microphone's better. Yes.
Awesome. Wait, is it on?
Is it on?
I don't know. Hello? Okay. My question is a little bit, I guess, on the practical side, but a lot of you mentioned
Is what we've been discussing up to this point completely impractical?
No, it's a little bit more practical than theoretical, I guess, is what I should be saying. But a lot of you mentioned going into internships or fellowships after college, and that's kind of like a norm within the journalism industry. And I guess I'm wondering how you all thought about trying to build a career as something that was long-term, but also using these shorter-term stints at like places that were kind of your dream place to work as a launch pad to get there, and kind of balancing those two desires for like stability, but also growth.
I can start on that one. I mean, I talked to Stephen a lot about this at the time. So I had gotten this Times internship offer senior year, and then had a reasonably compelling full-time job offer come through in the spring, sort of out of nowhere, like right before graduation, and had to consider whether it made more sense to do that than go through with the Times internship. And talking to Stephen and Elliot and others, Ashley Parker, who's won this award as well and is at the Post now, was at the Times at that time, she kind of had the checkmate argument to me at the end of the day, which was like, if you want to be at the Times, ultimately, maybe you should go to the Times. And, as Stephen said, like that's a risk, and you have to be comfortable with, I mean, this sort of goes for any piece of advice in this industry, but like you have to be comfortable with the instability that's inherent in all of this. Or if not comfortable, at least tolerant of that fact. And hope that doing good work will translate, even if it's not at the place that's currently employing you for whatever one of those programs you might be doing. But I mean, that's like a live question, and it's not obvious. I don't think there's like a, one size fits on that. It's sort of case by case. But yeah, I mean, there's always that sort of tension between going to the place that's probably long-term where you want to be, but not necessarily the most stable environment right away, versus a more stable kind of full-time job. I think on balance, the place where you can do the most ambitious work getting in the door, and just being able to write and report and show off in ways that you might not be able to do at a super high-profile place right away, is where I would lean, all things equal, but it's totally case by case.
Yeah, I would also say, I've been an intern many times, and I've also worked with interns and managed interns as an editor. And I will say that the best thing you can do once you do get your foot in the door is, like Isabella said, be super annoying, but in a nice, not annoying way. Be very present, and pitch stories and ask editors to go to lunch or have coffee, or don't say pick your brain, because we hate that phrase here, but ask them questions that are compelling and interesting, and kind of force them to be your mentors in a way. There are some people that interned at Cosmo and EW that I'm still in touch with, that like we chat all the time, and like they call me for questions, and like I call them for stuff too, because like now they're editors at places and it's awesome. But like once you're in the door, like use it as much as possible, and like really like Matt said, you have to be comfortable with the instability, but you can also make the most of your time while you're there and really like make an impression by doing awesome work, being really helpful, being really positive, and just being like a go-getter, which, you know, it seems really obvious, but, you know, I've worked with so many interns who get in the door and then they become wallflowers, and I like forget that they're there, or they don't pitch, or they're, you know, they say they're busy, and it's like, all right, well, you could have used this time in a much more beneficial way, I think. So yeah, there are just ways to like make your presence known in a really like in a way that makes them realize like, oh, we should probably hire this person when we can, or I'm going to refer them to my friend at a company where they're hiring. You know, I've done that many times too.
I feel like the pitching can't be overstated too. Like going, you know, 0 for 20 on your pitches and coming back with the 21st that they want to do is almost more endearing, I feel like, to an editor than
Wear 'em down.
giving up quickly. Yeah, there is no penalty for a rejected pitch, and you probably it's a credit in people's eyes that you sort of keep coming back for more.
I've seen people over the years, and we had this even in Philly back 20 years ago. You have a certain number of interns who are disappointed by the program of internship, that it's not as organized as they thought it was. It's not as set up to benefit them as much as they want it was. And what I always want to say to those interns is, why didn't you pitch me 10 stories every day when you were sitting with me to do that? But I do think that there's and I don't think it's new. I think people are complaining about it anew, but in fact, I've seen it all through our time in journalism. This idea that this is supposed to be, once you get the internship, it's supposed to be kind of given to you. And this business is always going to be about having tons of ideas, having them shot down, having that be your learning curve for how that you should have pitched them in the first place. And the other thing that I will say is, who told you the first couple of years out of college were going to be stable? Right? And what other business? I know that at Penn you get this idea because you can be a consultant, that there's a world out there where you can go and have a stable job for $100,000, and that's what you're sort of comparing this to. Well, I'll tell you, like, we meet a lot of those people 5 and 10 years out of consulting when they come and say, geez, I really wish that I'd been a writer or a lawyer or a doctor or an environmentalist. But so all I'm saying is that the fact that the first couple of years out of school is unstable, so what? It's supposed to be. And every once in a while, somebody gets a job right out of school that they want to keep for 2 years. It's been my experience that most people get a job out of school, and after a year, they want to get out of it anyway, unless it's the greatest job in the world that they lucked into. And the other thing that I would say is, in that job, are you making sure that if nothing else comes of it, that you have a story you wrote that somebody wants? That's a really great story. I don't care if you hated the whole year. That's a really good story. Because that really good story is the only thing that matters. If you can do that story and you can do that story again. And I don't want to make it just a writer's world, because there's an editor's version of that, and there's different versions of that. But all I would say is that I think increasingly, as we get into this world where people are upset with the way that people's work environments are in their 20s, all I would say is that you have to be careful about what you ask for. You know, for every Starbucks that gets unionized, there are people who are not going to advance in editorial settings. And look, I've tried to talk to many of my students. My students organized the Village Voice. They organized BuzzFeed. They organized a couple of things. And guess what? The Village Voice doesn't exist anymore, in part because of its unionization. And so all I'm saying is that what I always say to those people, if you want to be a union leader, that's cool. If you want to write and you want to edit, put all that energy into doing good work for yourself, because your belief that the place you're working for is going to rise to your expectations of what bosses should be and what companies should be, it's never going to happen. And any of these companies, no matter how big, can be changed in a big way because of either the economy or their economy. And you can't do anything about that. I mean, none of us can do anything about that except learn how to surf it and learn how to get to the next place where you can do work. But I'll tell you, when you lose those jobs, it's hard. But probably the best thing that ever happened to me is that I had a column at GQ when I was pretty young, mostly because Elliot was an editor there. And then when Elliot left GQ, I had that column for about 9 more minutes. And there were a lot of excuses. Oh, we'll give you a contract. We'll do all this. I never wrote another word for GQ after that contract was up. But that was incomprehensible to me. I mean, it was real money. It was a regular monthly gig, but it also made me realize that there's going to be a next. If you want to be in this business, there's going to be a next thing. So don't worry about the instability of it. Make choices that make sense for you geographically, economically, and know that you're going to rethink them. I mean, the time that you will stay in the job and be happy with it, whether it's good or not, will be like 3 to 6 months. When J School students, every J School student I ever helped get a job, within 3 weeks of them having the job, they were calling me to talk about what their next job was going to be. And that's okay. It is an unstable time when you're young and you're worried whether you're in the right place. Don't think that's just you, or it's just your DNA, or it's your talent set. It's what it's like to be young in, I think, a lot of fields. So all I would say is roll with it and use the fact that other people are in that situation with you to get through it and to do as much good work as you can at each place that you have. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question about sort of, I guess,
Can you give her the mic so it's... I know we're so fascinating that you can't.
Yeah, I had a question about sort of the competing ideologies out there regarding J School and like who would serve best, what you get out of it is, just anything about that.
You want me to take this?
Of course. You could talk about it too.
J School has changed a lot since I went, even though it was like less than 10 years ago. But I'll say that I think J School is an amazing experience for someone who has zero experience in journalism and didn't know until like the year before they go to J School that they wanted to be in journalism. It's fantastic for people who are mid-career and want a career change. It's great for people who don't have to go into debt to go to J School because you don't make a ton of money after going to J School.
And it's $80,000 now.
And it's $80,000
for 10
now
months.
For 10 months. That's Columbia, I guess. I don't know how much every other J School is. So I would weigh those options carefully because it's not as simple as going to, taking on a lot of debt to go into a really high-paying career that you're going to make it back. And I would say that, like, I'm glad that I went for various reasons that include, like, making my network stronger, having a foot in the door in New York media. I worked at the Village Voice and New York Magazine while I was at J School, which was amazing. And I kind of had my foot in both worlds. But, the people who I saw it really serve best were those who were making mid-career changes. And even since I went to J School, like half of the people that were in like my, advisory group or homeroom kind of like our tight little 10-person group, half of them aren't in journalism anymore. So, I think that kind of is an interesting fact in of itself. But I like if you don't have any experience and you want to do this, it's fantastic. The network is amazing. The teachers are great. You learn a lot of really cool things and you get to make a lot of mistakes with, little recourse. But, I don't think it's like necessary at all to be in this field. Steven teaches now, so like you might have some
did any of the
thoughts,
people that you went to J School use the masters to teach?
I don't know, actually.
Because I've seen that a little bit more recently, and it never occurred to me. I mean, I taught at the J School for 15 years. It never occurred to me that these people were getting master's degrees. I mean, I thought that they were doing it to learn journalism, and it never occurred to me that when they had a master's degree, that would make them more likely to be able to teach at a college. But in fact, it has made a difference for some of them, and the ones who, some of the ones who got pissed off just at being in the editorial environment, found nice places teaching. That's the only thing I would add to what Jess said. I mean, I think that one of the things that always surprised me about the J School was the number of people who had been Isabella and had done everything at their undergrad newspaper and thought that they had something to learn at J School when they were 23. Because the other thing was they weren't old enough yet to learn a new thing.
Yeah.
And in fact, so J School was amazing. The people who used to come to J School because they were newspaper reporters and hated it and wanted to switch to magazines, or at Columbia wanted to take Sam Friedman's famous book writing class, and
Or go into TV, like broadcast journalism.
exactly.
Or audio
Those
producing.
people, it's really clear. I'm here to learn something new, and when I get out of this, I can have a different job than I have. And in most cases, the places that loved them that they left would take them back if it didn't work out. I think that is still a real thing, except the amount of money it costs to do that is high. And in reality, all of us know that a 10-month program is too short. But it is, in fact, what the market will bear. Most people won't take even a full year off. Some of the programs include a summer, too. Columbia's does not. So what I would say is, are you an undergrad?
Yeah, I'm a senior.
You're a senior, and have you worked at the DP, and do you have a lot of experience? So what do you think you would learn at J School that you haven't learned in 4 years at the DP?
I feel like most of my experience is very much, very much so traditional reporting. And we don't really have anything in the realm of like broadcast here. And I had one internship in magazine writing, but then I really never touched it again. So yeah, that was just, I've been reading up on it, but I know it's kind of polarizing. So
No, it's not polarizing at all. I mean, basically, look, the choices that exist in all this stuff, ultimately you have to make a decision, and there's no right answer either way.
Sure.
You know, you have to just make the decision, own the answer, and if it works for you, do it, and if it doesn't, get out as quickly
Sure,
as you can.
yeah.
But keep in mind that there's a long tradition in journalism of people who learn in print and who want to switch to broadcast. And the thing that people never tell you about broadcast is that for every person who's on air and broadcast, there's a huge number of people who do almost the same job that people do at newspapers. So a lot of the people that we taught at the J School went to CBS News, not to be producers, but to write news stories for their websites. And those websites are growing. CNN.com and CBSNews.com and NBCNews.com, they put out a ton of content. And it's not just aggregating what's on TV. Some of those people will then rise naturally either onto the production side, or if they're good on camera, they'll be good on camera. But the idea that you have to go to J School to learn those skills, I don't think it's the only place you can learn those skills. I think you can, if you're a reporter, go into a variety of news organizations, whether they are NPR and radio only. I've seen a lot of, even here in Philly, a lot of the radio stations love to teach somebody who is mostly a print person how to do radio. I'm always amazed when I hear Sarah McCammon on the radio, because Sarah McCammon was the reporter at the Patriot News in Harrisburg who broke the sex abuse scandal at Penn State and had never done radio or anything in her life before, and now is, you know, a very much an active reporter on NPR. So all I'm saying is that, and there's a thing, you know, one of the things that we encourage a lot of our Nora Prize people to do is something called the Kroc Fellowship. The deadline for it is probably coming up in December. The Kroc Fellowship, a couple of our people have gotten it, is a fellowship at NPR where they basically take somebody who's good at reporting and seems smart and basically takes them into reporting situations, into on-air situations, into producing situations all over the country. Melody Joy Kramer, who was one of our earliest winners, went there. She's the one who first got All Things Considered, who got Cherry Gross to do anything computerized. There was nothing computerized before Melody went there. She was a producer on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. And now she's like a huge consultant in the world of public all broadcasting. So I think you can learn those things there. I think actually what J School is good at, a thing you wouldn't learn, it's not dissimilar from film school. The documentary program, like at J School at NYU and at Columbia, that's probably a skill set that you wouldn't get outside, and otherwise you would go to film school for. But to go from newspapers to magazines or something like that right out of school, I think you try to get the jobs first. Because
People also ask reporters to go on TV or like on the radio and talk about their stories, so you can kind of get informal experience that way. Like I am very early in my career, and like some stories I've written that are just like breaking news stories, people ask me to like talk about it on the radio. Or when I was at Bloomberg, I did like Bloomberg TV, which nobody watches, but whatever. And you get experience that way, and you can like learn how to talk about your story, which is very different than reporting it.
And you can, you know, and I will say, I think that Jess did this too. You know, Jess put in the applications, and I think that if she had gotten a job that she really wanted, she might have deferred. Yeah. So I don't think, you know, the applications cost what they cost. So I don't think it's an impossible thing to say to look at Columbia, to look at NYU. Columbia and NYU programs are really different from each other. I don't want to say one's better because I taught in the Columbia system, but they are different. Berkeley is different. Missouri is different. Northwestern is different. Northwestern has like a tie to the Marshall Project and a lot of the things in the Midwest that the Eastern schools don't necessarily have. I think the Eastern schools are tied better to ProPublica. But guess what? Penn is tied to ProPublica directly, and there a lot of people at ProPublica were Penn undergrads who did not go to grad school. And so there have been people who've risen that way. So all I would say at this point as a senior, give yourself options. Consider all the options. Look at all the internships that you can apply for. If you want to apply to a couple J schools, that's okay. But give yourself options and then make the best choice. The biggest thing that I find with young people is that they don't give themselves choices every time they want to make a change. Their changes are too based on one person calling them and saying, do you want to come work at this place? Rather than you saying, okay, if you take that call, that means you're willing to change jobs. So the question is, if you're willing to change jobs, are you only going to consider the job you have and the job you're being offered? Or are you going to say, hey, maybe I should let at least my friends from Penn and the people I met at Kelly Writer's house at the Nora Prize night know that I am interested in other opportunities, because you never know what can be available. I mean, look at what Jess is doing. I mean, Jess was working at one place for a really long time. Now that she can tell a bunch of different people, if you have something available to me, I'll do it. You realize how much other kinds of work is around. And I think that we're also more open to taking job work and, one-off pieces than, before everything was about having a full-time job or having a contract, but it's different. So it's not an either-or question. Give yourself the opportunity to do both. See where you get in. See what opportunities you have. Make the smartest decision for yourself, and then rinse and repeat. Yes,
Thank
go ahead.
you.
Hi, I just wanted to ask Jess really quickly about the YA industry specifically.
Go ahead. Say it again.
The YA industry
Does
specifically.
everybody here know what YA is? Raise your hand if you don't know what it is. Okay, good.
What was your querying process like, and was it difficult to support yourself throughout?
Yeah, the querying process for any fiction book is basically that you write a pitch in an email, and if you Google how to query a fiction book, there's so many different examples online, and that's really how I found the format. And then you make a list of agents that you think might be interested in it, and for me, because I'd worked in magazines and specifically women's magazines, I really reached out to agents who also represented former magazine editors or magazine editors who were also novelists, because there are actually so many journalists who write novels on the side, which is really exciting. And so I wanted to find someone who would support both of those careers. And yeah, and I kind of just cold pitched a bunch of people, which was really, a really harrowing experience. And, I went through the whole process, and I got a couple agents who were interested, and only one agent said yes and wanted to work with me. And turns out you only need one. So that was great. But yeah, it's tough. It's a lot like pitching a nonfiction story to an editor that you don't know. But yeah, that's kind of, I just went through the slush pile, really. And I thought I could network my way into it, and I couldn't. So yeah.
Actually, what you just said in a nutshell is the key to everything in this business. Only one person has to say yes.
Yes.
You don't have to know the whole industry. You don't have to impress the whole industry. You don't have to understand the whole industry. Your goal is to go from one person to another person who thinks your work is interesting or could be interesting, and has the power to give you white space that you get to fill. That's all you need. So is the organization fucked up? Of course it is. So, who cares? Is somebody saying yes to what you want to be able to do to move your journalistic career forward? It's the most important thing, and it's easy to forget because we can get so caught up in the business and the fear of the economy and the fear of what's happening in the world. That's still ultimately in books, in magazines, in broadcast, it's still the same thing. Who controls something that they can say yes, that you can have that time or that space.
Mm-hmm. And I also just want to say, you asked how I supported myself, and I'm not sure if you mean financially or emotionally, but
talk about both.
But I will say that it was never really I never really hoped or thought or dreamed that I would quit my day job. if you want to write books, that's amazing. It's like such an exciting, incredible creative endeavor. But like what I kept hearing over and over and over again is like, you can't really support yourself writing novels. You know, it's probably like the top 0.0001% of people who just write novels and like that's their life. And like I've mentioned, it's not my life. Like I have so many different jobs that I do in order to like make a fulfilling life for myself. And like make enough money for myself to live. So I'll say like it was always a side hustle. It was always a side business. And basically like the decision that I made in June of last year was to like swap it from being, you know, like a 60% journalism thing, 40% novels to now it's like 60% novels, 40% journalism. So I just want to say, like, if you're someone who's out there and you have lots of different interests in, you know, TV and documentaries and in nonfiction and fiction, like you don't have to only do one. Like you can do all of them. You might have to like, you know, decide where to put your efforts and your, you know, enthusiasm and your energy, but like you can do it all. You just have to be thoughtful and careful and make sure that you're taking care of yourself and your time management in ways that, you know, work for you. But I think for a lot of my early career, I felt like I had to choose, and now I feel so much freer and so, you know, lucky and grateful that I can do all of these things that make me, you know, happy. So. Because you build up to it, and I think one of the dangers is I meet 22. A lot of young people and mid-career people who say this: I hate my job, I'm gonna freelance. Okay, but they have no freelance networks, they have no, you know, nothing set up, so they're just gonna walk away from their income, and it could be months or a year before they have income. And I know that seems heroic, but to me it's magical thinking, and it's not necessary. You know, people have to make decisions about whether they're going to take jobs that allow them to write on the side. And that's a negotiating point at whatever point you're at in your career. And there's a reason for it, because if you can write on the side, then you can start building up the possibility of either having a freelance career or going to where you're going to go. But it's worth thinking about negotiating that point, especially in an economy that's more challenging. But remember, there's no heroics that come from starting freelancing from scratch. You know, the best freelancers are people who either leave their full-time jobs because they have contracts with the place that they had their full-time job and let them write about the thing on contract as a freelancer, or that they've done enough freelancing on the side that somebody else can give them that job. That is never going to change. And I rarely meet somebody who stops their career and says, I just want to concentrate on freelancing. Not in nonfiction. I mean, I understand people do this sometimes in fiction because they want to be artists. My wife is a fiction writer. She's an artist. I don't pretend to understand what it means to be an artist. What we do is not art. What we do is nonfiction writing. It's creative sometimes. It's less creative other times. It's a world that has an economy that seems like it's the same as art, but it's not. Don't make nonfiction, freelancing into writing your novel and being Jack Kerouac. It's not what it is, and it's not necessary. You know, part of the reason you came to Penn was to learn how to make practical decisions, even about the most impractical things. That's part of the reason that those of us who made it in nonfiction, that's what we learned at Penn. And Penn didn't tell us to be nonfiction writers. The whole time our parents were telling us, are you out of your minds? We sent you to be doctors and lawyers. You know, but we did learn a Penn way of doing this job, and it's not surprising that people figure out how to make. I don't think their work is particularly commercial. I think that they make smart business decisions about their careers to allow themselves to do this. Jess has made a number of smart business decisions along the way that were informed and paid off for her and were reasonable. And there was a plan B if they didn't work out. And there's no reason not to do that. Anyway, I'm getting the watch, but you don't even have a watch. I mean, don't do this if you don't. There you go. That's a clock. Okay. So the whole key to this meeting is that it carries on into the food. So please don't leave. Please come and talk to the panelists. And thank you so much for your attention. This is always a great night, and good things always come out of this night. And it's always wonderful to see these guys. So thank you all very much. You guys are great. Thank you. That was fun.
I was like shivering.
Oh, no.
I kept fidgeting.
You right on top.